everyone. This is Joan Raymond, and welcome to A Heart for Writing. And this is where I offer tips and encouragement, and we talk to writers of different genres. So, to help you at any point in your writing journey to see that, we're all going through the same thing. So, today, my guest is K.A. Lugo. She was originally from California, and now she's living in Ireland. Since 2005, K.A. has published 14 titles in genres including romantic suspense, erotic romance, cozy mystery as Kimberly Shortland, and now thrillers as K.A. Lugo. Let's bring on Kimberly.
Hi,
Hi,
Joan.
Kim.
Thanks for inviting me.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm great. I know I'm at 10 o'clock in the morning, and you're like, what, 6 o'clock in the evening?
Yes, it's gone 6:20.
Yeah.
And it's still bright.
It's still bright. That's awesome.
Yeah, I love the long summer days here.
I bet. And I'm sure it's like green there compared to California. So, yeah, I mean, you used to be from California.
Yeah. When I first came over, people would say, how could you come to Ireland? It's so green there and it never rains. And I'm like, how can it be green if it never rains? Last time I was home, everything was like painted the same sand color. It matched the brown mountains and it matched the haze in the sky.
Well, we just have that color palette that, never changes. So,
yeah.
So a little bit about your background, which I'm real curious about before we talk about your book. So you were raised near San Francisco, the Bay Area, just a beautiful area. And it says in 1997, you left the employ of Clint Eastwood. I need to know about that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I grew up knowing him through my family's business. I was kind of like in the same era as his two older children, Kyle and Allison. And our businesses did his business, aside from acting, he owned a restaurant across the road from our business. So we did business back and forth together. So he was just there all the time when I was growing up. And eventually I went looking for work back in the early 90s. And he owns a specialty hotel in Carmel, which is where I'm from. And I got a job there. One of my diplomas is in hotel restaurant management. And I got a job working there and I had a great time just meeting everybody and meeting all the people from Hollywood and collecting lots of stories from all the people that were there.
I was going to say, I bet that was wonderful fodder for stories for, later books and whatnot.
I haven't had an opportunity to use any of the stories from there in my books.
Okay.
But we'll be
talking
about...
at least the characters. It seems like you would see different people and have ideas for characters or whatnot.
Yeah, there's a lot of different personalities that would go in and out of the place. A lot of things went on there.
I can tell there's a story behind that,
but yeah, like there's certain personality traits. Like I know we're going to be talking about my Jack Slaughter series soon. Jack is kind of a combination of the old Dirty Harry and Streets of San Francisco kind of vibe.
Yeah.
So, I have pulled in a little bit of that no nonsense, gritty kind of like Harry Callahan, takes no prisoners kind of detective or inspector.
Right.
So I guess there's kind of a bit of that in there, but
in Streets of San Francisco, that was my day. That was wasn't that oh gosh, I can see him. Help me out here. Who's Carl Malden and Michael Douglas?
Michael Douglas.
Yeah.
I think Richard Hatch did the last season.
Yeah, that was way back when.
After Douglas left.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Oh, I love that series. It comes on rerun here occasionally, and I'll just watch it start to finish.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, we all watched it back then.
Yeah, and then you go through the city today, and it doesn't look anything like the old city.
I haven't been to San Francisco in years. I mean, we're only 4 or 5 hours away, but haven't been there for a while.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, when did you first realize you had a heart for writing?
I don't know. I remember growing up always liking to tell stories. And I remember specifically going to the library and getting picture books so that I could go home and then write the story of what I saw in the pictures.
Oh, cool.
One of my first novels was I wrote in high school. And it was just, teenager freestyle storytelling, I guess you would call it. And then my sister found it and she's like, Mom, Kim's writing stories. And then I remember I was sitting with my brother and sister, and I think I was doing my homework, and I had the radio on and watching my brother and sister play. And the Beatles came on Paperback Writer. And I've been reading romance novels for years at that point. And I went, I could do that. So I sat down and I did a outline or little synopsis of what I thought I could write, and kind of tinkered with it for a long time. And I would probably say when I was about 20, I finally finished the novel. It was my first full novel. It was historical. And I thought, I read historicals. This is my niche. That's what I'm going to write. Except I ended up only publishing, or mostly publishing, contemporaries after that.
All right.
But hey, I think that was kind of like the progression of the writing.
Yeah, because you have definitely quite a lot of genres, and I'm going to ask that in a minute. But so you said you wrote the kind of like the outline synopsis. So are you a plotter? Do you know exactly what's going to happen? Are you a pantser, discovery, like you have no idea, or a combo?
A little bit of both. I can say, okay, well, this is a story I think I'd like to write. This is what I want to happen in it. This is how it should end. And I have the end like a flag at the end that says, here, come and get me. And then I just write the story aiming at that ending.
Do you always know who the killer is, or who the bad guy is?
No, as a matter of fact, and we can talk about that with the Jack story, because his backstory happens to have like an open backstory. But not always will I know the ending. It's kind of like the situation I want to happen.
Right.
When I was writing romance, it was kind of like obvious. It's got to be a happily ever after. The hero and heroine have to be together. It has to be happy. But with thrillers, it's completely different.
Yeah, like my cozies. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just keep writing, and they just keep telling me things. So.
That's exactly it.
So what about the variety of genres? I mean, I have 3 genres I've written in, but you definitely romantic suspense, cozy mystery, which cozies are a lot gentler mysteries. Right now you're doing thriller, and that's not as gentle at all.
No.
So talk about why you transitioned, or what caused you to transition from Kimberly to K.A.
Probably a few things. I've written enough romance that I kind of felt like I was like I had said everything I wanted to say in those books. Every book kind of has a little bit of a message that it sends to the readers. And I felt like I was done with that for romance. There's so much romance out there. And I know there's a lot of mystery, thriller, crime-based stories too. But I always try and challenge myself with something different. So I went from historical romance to contemporary to erotic romance. And then I said, well, I'm going to try writing a cozy. So I wrote a cozy, and that was fun. But all the reviewers think that it's a sweet romance, even though there's like no romance in it. I guess just how my writing style is, just came across that way. Then I wanted to try something different. So I was writing first person present tense, which I'd never done before.
Whoa,
so
that's tough.
Yeah. And then I just got to where I was like I said, I felt like I had said enough in that genre, in the romance genre. And I wanted to try something different. And I'm like, okay, well, what's the polar opposite of romance? Crime. No romance, no happily ever after, or very little happily ever after, or happy for now, or the crime has been solved. So that's the happily ever after for that case.
Right. There's a closure of some sort.
Yeah, it's some type of closure, whether it's happy or not. At least the story comes full circle to the end. Right. And I have this thing in my head that says, well, this is going to happen. And I say, well, no, it doesn't. Or somebody says, oh, I'm sorry. And I say in the back of my head, no, you're not. Or I didn't kill this person. Yes, you did. It's kind of like I have that opposite thing in my head. So when I'm writing, that's not my natural personality like that. But like when I'm writing and a character says something, I'm like, that's what the readers are going to expect. So let's give the reader something they're not going to expect.
Right.
So that's kind of like the no, you didn't, yes, you are, and I'm going to prove it.
Right.
So that's
So
what I've done.
so I hear my characters, they talk to me all the time. So what do you your characters ever stop talking to you, or they talk too much?
I think it depends on what's going on around me during the day in the chem life.
Hmm.
Um, if I've got some quiet time and there's nothing else going on around me, the husband's at work or outside or walking the dog, the house is quiet, there's no TV, there's no radio, nothing. And suddenly like my thoughts can wake up and it's like, oh, we're gonna think about this now.
Yeah.
Or I can get with somebody who's also a writer and we start talking about um, what we're working on. And for example, a couple of days ago, I met with my mentor,
Hmm.
who's teaching me screenwriting, and we had only allotted about maybe 45 minutes to an hour, and we were on for 2.5 hours. I ended up coming up with the next 3 books in my
Wow.
series.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and they're not fully plotted out, but I know what's happening, and I have the expected ending that flag at the end that I can uh, work my way toward in the story.
Right. So
So now
let's
I'm
talk
like all itching to get writing again.
now. The screenwriting came out of the Slaughtered series, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to show a picture of the two books. So, can you tell us about these? The first one was Slaughtered. The second one was Witness to Slaughter, correct?
Right.
Okay,
Yeah. Each of the book titles has Slaughter in it somehow because that's Jack's last name.
right. And obviously, they take place in the Bay Area. That's the San Francisco Bridge. I love the
Yeah.
covers. They're wonderful.
Yeah. I get my covers done by Cora Graphics, who's actually based in Italy.
Oh wow.
And the model on the cover is actually her fiance. He's an Italian singer called Rocco Benedetto.
That's so funny.
Yeah. He's got that really deep voice that I like for in men. So it was kind of like a no-brainer.
So, do you use that when do you hear that deep voice when you hear Jack talking?
A lot of times, yeah, I
Uh-huh.
do. Yeah.
Or when you read back the dialogue, it's in his tone.
Yeah, well, what I'd like to find is if Rocco could learn more English so he could record the books as audio and he could read them for me.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
And you said that it actually won an award, or it was a finalist. Tell us about
Witness
that.
to Slaughter was the Roan, the Indie Tale Roan Award. I was effectively a second place finalist for the thriller category last year.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the woman who won the first place is Melinda Colt for her Dublin series. What's ironic is she doesn't live in Ireland, but she won the award for her series set in Dublin, Dublin City here.
And you live in Ireland, and yours
Writing
is
San Francisco.
yeah, that's funny. But you
Yeah.
lived in San Francisco, so it's not an unfamiliar territory to
Well,
you.
I played in San Francisco. I always lived in Carmel, Monterey
Yeah.
area down the peninsula, but it's only
Yeah.
it's about 3.5 hours drive with the traffic through the South Bay. But
Right.
when I was still living home, it was like maybe an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours to get to the South San Francisco.
Mhm.
So I could go up on a day trip and just play all day.
Yeah.
And then come home.
But you know the feel of the city. You understand, walking up and down the hills.
There for several years. They've just now moved back to Carmel. So every time I went home, I was always, visiting there with them.
Right.
So it's not like San Francisco is a place I've never been.
Mhm.
I've spent a lot of time there, and I know how the traffic works, and the architecture and the different districts around the city. So
Right.
I don't know it like a native San Franciscan, but I know it pretty well.
Right.
I'm comfortable enough that I can write around it.
Do you ever use Google Maps to make sure you have the streets right?
Oh yeah.
And
nothing worse than using your GPS to go, up and down a street somewhere only to find out that it's now turned one way.
yeah. And I know this question comes up a lot with writers. They're like, I'm using a real city, but do I make up the name of a place where this person gets killed? So how do you deal with that?
I don't have a problem using real names as long as I'm
You
not
mean like
disparaging.
real restaurant names or something?
Pardon?
Real names of establishments, that's what.
Yeah, yeah. As long as I'm not disparaging the business or the area, or if it's a monument, I don't disparage it.
Right.
So I typically don't kill off characters in a known place.
Mhm.
For example, in Witness to Slaughter, I have created a fictional bar. It's a nightclub,
Mhm.
and it's a fictional nightclub with fictional people in it, but it's in a real district right next to real things.
Right. So if
So
somebody was walking the street, they could be, "Oh, this is probably where it's located," but it's really not there.
right, right. In this case, it was next to oh gosh, now the name has gone out of my head. The Castro Theater in the Castro district,
Okay.
and this was uh, a club for gay people, and it
Okay.
was set during a drag queen competition.
Okay.
So the building, I think, is like a CVS in reality, but it's set next to the Castro Theater, and it's got the same building look that is the building next to the theater,
Mhm.
and it's the same street, and it's the same other neighbors. I use the Walgreens down the road for something and another business for something else.
Mhm.
Um, but it was totally not disparaging.
Right.
Like Jack goes into the Walgreens to get some toys for the Toys for Tots, Christmas drive,
Right.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if I just make a point of just not disparaging anything, and
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
have a problem using real names for things, um, as long as I'm not, like I said, as long as I'm not disparaging it.
Right. And
Um,
that's what I've heard. People are like, I personally have a made up town because I don't want anybody to think that. And I mean, if anybody knows where it's really located, they know which town I'm talking about. It's right above Bakersfield. I mean, I give, you
yeah,
know, you know where it is, but I've made up all the names because it's like, I don't want somebody to think it was, the doctor, the dentist, the whoever, and they're going to
right.
look at that person like weird or something. So,
Yeah, I think Sue Grafton did that with her Kinsey Milhone story. I think was it set in San Pedro, but it was really Santa Maria or somewhere right around there.
yeah. And my first story was set in San Diego, and I used real Starbucks, I used real streets, I Googled it, I knew what streets were
Yeah,
what, and, because nothing bad happened at any of those places, they were just
right.
chatting or something.
Well, then you've got the opposite, like Dean Koontz did. He set his midnight stories in Carmel, and he gave the streets different names. But
Mhm.
you'd have to be a local there to understand what he did.
Right.
He actually put our family business in one of the books, and
Cool.
I knew it because it was like there was a Mexican restaurant next door. He gave it a different name. He
Mhm.
called the street something a little bit different, and you drove 2 blocks down to Ocean Street. It's Ocean Avenue. You take a right, you go down the hill to the beach, and it's
Right.
Midnight Beach rather than Carmel Beach. It
Right.
was just little things like that that he just tweaked so you thought it was a fictional town, but if you were from there, you knew what it was.
Right, exactly. And that's the same with my cozy town because people would know,
Yeah,
that this boulevard is actually this other boulevard. I mean, but I made a whole map of the town. I made a map and then I had a graphic designer make it so my readers can actually download a copy of the map so they can
that's cool.
they can follow all the goodies. Um so let's go back to the Slaughtered series. You have or the Jack, I'm going to say it wrong, but let's talk about the screenwriting because that is something new for you, isn't it?
It is. I get these thoughts that pop up in my head every now and again, and I'll post a note somewhere and say, well, what about this? And suddenly I'm being inundated with people going, I'll help you. And like within a week, I started working with my mentor,
Mhm.
and it started off right then. I mean, I hadn't finished my third book yet, and I was doing all these other things. It was just before Christmas. So I was busy, winding down the year for that.
Right.
And suddenly I was like feet first in the fire in a new project, and I'm still there. So,
And how is screenwriting different than writing a novel?
um, Well, I can tell you from the perspective for me, because the book was already written. I didn't have to start from the ground up with a story idea and then have to write, because normally you write the outline first, then you have to do character arcs, and then you have to do like a by-act version of the story. It's like the fourth, maybe the fifth version of the story actually becomes the screenplay itself. For me, I'm actually translating the novel into a script. So I've already, and I did have to write the outline for it. That was one of the main things that was part of the lesson. Write the outline. I know you've written the book, he said, but you need to have the outline.
Mm-hmm.
So at least you have something shorter than a 90 something thousand book, word book that you go through. It'll be right there in the outline.
Isn't it 120 pages because they don't want it longer than?
He said like around 25,000 words, 100 pages. And it doesn't matter how long the book is. That's kind of like the parameter.
Right.
And I'm trying to cram a lot into it. You think, if a book is 75,000 words, that if you only need 25,000, you strip out all of the narrative and you've got the dialogue, and that's what you have to plug in. Mm-hmm. Except it's not that easy.
Right.
I'm at about 32,000 words right now. It's finished and I'm editing it out, but that was the final first draft.
And it really is dialogue, because that's what you're hearing, but then you have to have interior, somewhere, or you have to have exterior, daytime, and you have to talk, the character walks in or something like that. So you have to give some
action lines, and then you have your cut to or your dissolve to, and then you have voiceovers or inner voices. And you have to know how to do all of those. And some of mine deals with a lot of flashbacks. So I had to learn how to write flashbacks, but I'm also dealing with Jack's inner turmoil, and those inner thoughts that haunt him they come up during the fiction story, but you can't put all the emotion into a screenplay. It's all fact. Jack runs his fingers through his hair. Who cares why? He just does it.
Yeah.
And the dialogue and the director will tell you why he's doing it. And that way the actor can say, okay, well, he's having an emotional moment, and, he runs his fingers through his hair to make himself feel better or whatever.
Right. And this is where a lot the actors interpreting what you've written.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's I can't pronounce it usually very well. Parentheticals that are just short 2 or 3 words that go right above, normally right above a piece of dialogue, that tell you what the actor should be doing right there.
Right.
So those all have to be put in place.
But you also have to be careful, because you don't want to, keep the actor without doing their job, because that's what their job is. Yeah.
Right. So, and then also with those action lines, you want to make sure that you're not doubling up between the action and the parenthetical.
Right.
So I'm actually, like I said, I'm like about 32,000 words into a 25,000 word manuscript or a screenplay. So I'm having to go through and like cut out all of the emotional stuff that slipped through. I'm working on it.
Well, it's new.
Yeah, it's a whole new thing. It's a whole new experience. And I love challenging myself. And that goes back to last November, when I felt like I needed to challenge myself again, because I had done the contemporary, I'd done the historicals, I did the cozy, I did the erotica, I did all the other stuff, and I was looking for a new challenge, and what else to challenge myself with besides straight thrillers,
right?
Was screenplay.
And I should. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, and I happened to find a really great mentor, because he had great mentors, and he's educated, he's college educated, he's finishing, I think he's finishing his master's or his doctorate, so he can teach in university.
Wow. So
he's got a career plan, and he's got things in front of him, and his ideas are fresh. A lot of really great ideas. And that's where the next 3 books came in.
Mhm.
And now that I'm all jazzed to get writing again, now my characters are waking up, so I'm waking up. Like, I gotta write this. I gotta write this. And he's like, nope, you got to finish book 3 first.
Yep. How long does it normally take you to write a book?
Well, when I was doing romance, I could write a romance in about, let's say, 7 to 10 weeks.
Okay.
And with thrillers, because I've got a full-time job that goes year round now, before I was working in the travel business. So I was kind of, at wit's end in the wintertime. So I do all my writing then.
Mm-hmm.
So now, if I had the time, I could probably write 2 books a year. Right now, I'm lucky to get 1 book, but I'm really late on book 3 at the moment. So
is that the one that's
not really an average at the moment? No.
Is that the one that's going? Their characters keep talking too much. Is that the one where they're?
Well, yeah.
They keep throwing stuff at you.
Yeah. I've got too many things I want to put into this book that I can move to the next book. Mm-hmm. I usually run 2 stories side by side because Jack is he was a homicide detective, and after his family tragedy, he took some time off and he just never went back. So he started a private investigators business to, help fund his life. Mm-hmm. And the money also goes towards finding out what happened to his family. Okay. He came home one night, found that his dog had been killed. His daughter had been killed. His wife is missing. No ransom note, nothing. Slaughter opens up, the first book, Slaughter opens up 3 years after that event, and he still hasn't gone back to work. Wow. So the money funds that investigation as it can. But the story normally will take place, each book will have him taking on a case, and it's sort of flowed into something else that the police department is working on. Mm-hmm. So he kind of inadvertently gets involved. In the third book, it hasn't really happened like that. There's 2 separate cases that are running side by side. One's a bit more complicated than the other. Mm-hmm. And my mentor was reading the book because he's helping me sort out some of the stuff at the end. And he said to me, as far as I'm concerned, the book is finished because both of the story arcs are completed. You just need the wrap up and that's it. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, but I have all these other things I want to put in. And he's like, put them in the next book.
And see, he can see it because he's far enough away from it. You're right there in front of it.
Exactly. You can't see the spot when you're standing on it.
Right.
So he's like, they don't really move the story forward. You've got your like little hook to get people into the next book, because my books tend to have like a little cliffhanger at the end. Right. One little thing that's like, okay, well, where's the next page? Where's the next book?
It's that tickle. It's that tickle that you need to itch, that you have to pick up the next book.
Exactly. So he says, you've got it all. You just need to finish the writing of this book and get it out and then get started on the next book.
Right.
And you can add these things into the next book because it'll make that next book more richer than it would have been without it.
I think I heard somewhere where they say that you're always supposed to end the book like several pages or a chapter before you think it should end. And you should always start it in the second chapter that you wrote, because the first one is usually not important. There's something about
I've heard that too. And I've experienced the last part where I've written a book and anybody who's read it say, well, the story really started in chapter 2, Mm-hmm. So I would write everything that I need, take out chapter 1 and then filter it back in later,
right.
through the book.
Right.
And that seems to work pretty well.
Yeah.
It's kind of do that with Jack, but it's with my romances, it did.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of weird because you think that you're starting it, but it's really for you. And you need to take that and, like you said, filter it throughout the book.
Yeah, it's more like you could call it like an info dump.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's mostly narrative. But you can take it out and use it as part of your outline. Mm-hmm. And I think that works really well to do it that way. I find that when I have a really good, solid opening line or opening couple lines, I can then just put my skis on and just go.
Right.
Otherwise, it's just.
Do you feel like you're fumbling around just trying to give them a whole lot of information so they understand? But then if you take that out, it's like, oh, I didn't need that. We just start with this line of dialogue that's like, what, or something like that.
Exactly. So it all comes with experience, and especially like changing genres. There's a little bit, it's a bit different writing between romance and thrillers.
Of course, beats.
Uh,
There's beats there, and there's also that other word that I can't think of all of a sudden. But there's tropes. There's things that have to be in there. You know.
yeah, and I don't necessarily follow formats or styles. Like this has to happen.
Mhm.
Formula. I don't follow a formula. That's the word I was looking for.
Mhm.
Where things have to happen at this point, and then something has to happen at this point.
Yeah.
It's like I just let the story flow how it's going to flow.
Right.
How I normally write is I treat it like I'm on a road trip, and I've got the map in front of me, and I've got a list of things I want to see along the way, and I've got my starting point and my end point. So as I get started on my trip, it's like, okay, well, I want to do this over here, so I've got to take this off ramp, and I go and do that, and then I find other roads to take me. As long as I'm moving forward,
Right.
each little turn off that I make is a turn in the story, something to drive the story forward. If I come to a cul-de-sac or a dead end somewhere and the story is not going anywhere, I know that I can turn my little car around, go back to the road where the story was working, take another route, and keep going forward.
That's awesome. I love that analogy.
It doesn't mean
Yeah.
that I'm deleting that scene. I'm just moving it to a file somewhere that if I think that something that happened on that particular route will be helpful somewhere else, I can add parts of it in. So why rewrite it when it's already written? You can just copy and paste it over,
Right.
and then smooth it out if it works.
Yeah, and that's what another person I interviewed, Brendan, which was a couple of weeks ago, and he said, "Don't ever throw anything away. Always keep it because you never know when you're going to need it." You know.
Right.
So
And
we're
so we
almost.
have to rewrite things.
Yes, exactly. Because
Yeah.
sometimes when you did it the first time, it was pretty awesome. Those are the things you're like, oh man, I don't want to just like, get rid of this. But then if
Yeah.
it fits somewhere else,
That was really good writing. I'm not going to delete it.
yeah, exactly.
But it doesn't work here, so move it somewhere where you can use it later.
And I think that's where, as a seasoned writer or one that's done this for a while, you can see that it really sticks out. It's not where it's supposed to be. It's just kind of like, hey, the dog wants to say something. That's awesome. Give it an opinion. We're almost at the end here. I wanted to ask you one more question, which kind of fits in with what you were saying. So,
Yeah.
when a person is just starting to write, what advice would you have for a new writer?
Read as much as possible in the genre that you want to write in,
Mhm.
but develop your own voice. Don't be afraid to read in other genres because every author has their own voice and you might pick up something that works for you. If you go to a seasoned writer, and I'm not talking about somebody who has maybe 1 or 2 books that are published, somebody that's got 5 or 6 or 10 books or more.
Mhm.
When I'm talking seasoned, not just salted. If they give you advice, follow it because they know. Don't disparage the advice, even if you don't use it or use it all. Appreciate it for what it is because they're only trying to help you.
Right.
Nobody's going to give you bad advice to make you fail. They want you to succeed, so they give you good advice. If they give you bad advice, this looks bad on them. So what's the point?
And it's interesting. The writing community is very helpful. I'm in enough groups. You and I are in some of the same groups together, and
Yeah.
people want to help you. They don't. They want to see you succeed. We're really not in competition with each other. Even if we
No.
both were writing cozies right now, I don't feel like we're in competition. Excuse me. We have different cities. We have different characters. We have different plots. I mean, there's really no brand new ideas. There's all ideas are kind of the same, but I mean, we have our own voice, and that's what makes it unique. And for us to help each other only helps
Well, they
raise
say
the
there's only
standard.
7 basic plot lines, and
That's it. Yeah.
it's like man versus man, man versus nature, and man meaning humans.
Right.
Man versus himself, man versus God. I can't remember what they all are, but you don't just have 7 stories. There's thousands of writers, and there's millions of stories out there, all based on those premises.
Right.
And you can combine them. Like Jack. Jack battles himself, and he battles with the bad guys.
Well, there's always an internal struggle, and there's always an external struggle
Right.
because
Right. We're not one dimensional.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that Yeah, listening to I mean, essentially they're going to be mentors. You know,
Mhm.
anybody who's giving you advice, even if it's just one bit of advice, that's still mentoring you. So it's good to listen to them.
That's awesome, Kim. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed learning from you and getting to know your stories better and your process. And I appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it. I've always had some really great conversations with you um,
Yes.
offline, and
Hmm.
I think that we both learned from each other.
I
I know I've
agree.
learned a lot of things from you as well.
Thank you. So we'll talk soon.
Thank you very much.
So I'm going to in the description of this broadcast, there'll be all the information on how you can find Kim, her website, her Facebook, all that good stuff. So if you want to connect with her, find her books, it'll be right there. And if you're interested in how I help writers, I have a 7-day video series. It's free. It's Overcoming Blank Page Syndrome. So it's like when you stare at the computer and you just can't write. Um, Short videos. It's free. Just there's going to be a link in the description also. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next time.